and I worked for him for about eight months. Spent some time in the Minister of the Environment, Conservation and Parks office. Spent a bit of time at the Minister of Finance's office in Ontario, and lastly at Municipal Affairs and Housing. When this election was rolling around and the PC party needed a candidate, I figured I'd put my hand up because I thought I could do pretty good at this. So we've been, fighting for a lot of investments, which I'm sure we'll get into to try to make Brampton a little bit better, but also just give the best customer service that I can to the residents of Brampton North. It's been a while since we've had in Brampton North. Been a while since we had a Heart Lake boy or girl kind of holding the seat. And I love my neighborhood, and I want to fight for it. And it's not my riding's not only Heart Lake. We got Springdale, we've got parts of North Bramalea, M, N, J, P sections, so far we've been fighting to try to make Brampton the best that it can be.
So let me ask you, Graham. You've had some political experience before, so tell us a little bit about that.
So I actually started about a decade ago. I was an intern for a guy named Parm Gill. So he was the federal member of parliament for
we know Parm.
Brampton Springdale at the time. And I used to do fun things like carrying his bags and putting letters in envelopes and attending committee, taking notes. And I remember, Don, I got a big promotion back then where they actually allowed me to look at the main email account, and I got to click flag on the important emails and delete the spam that wasn't important. And that was my big promotion at the time. Kind of worked my way up, worked in his office. By the end of the term, I think he relied on me quite a bit. I was definitely answering emails myself, and I was doing the whole bit. Obviously, that election didn't work out in 2015. And I didn't think I was going to get back into politics really until 2018 rolled around. A guy named Amarjot Sandhu reached out to me, who your viewers will know.
Yeah, we know. Yep.
A member for Brampton West, and he needed a campaign manager. So we went out and knocked doors and kind of corralled volunteers. We were able to squeak through that election by about 490 votes. And then I began my career in government. I worked for a guy named Rod Phillips when he was the environment minister. Then he became the finance minister. He took me with him. We did a lot of great things during that time. My time at finance, some of the things that we worked on were actually getting the investment to turn Peel Memorial back into a hospital, investing in the planning grant to start the process for the TMU medical school. It was called Ryerson back then, but getting that medical school for the city. And then, the opportunity came up to run this time for the party and the riding I grew up in Brampton North. And the idea that I get to represent the neighborhood has always been something that I thought I might want to do. And I was lucky because I know not everybody gets to win their first election. I realized I was very lucky, kind of good time, a good place. We worked hard as well, and the residents rewarded me for it. And
so you've been a conservative. You've been a conservative basically all along. You haven't jumped ship from Liberal to NDP to back and forth and everything else.
No, not really. Like there's Liberals I quite like and get along with, and got plenty of Liberal friends. My dad's actually more of a Liberal than anything else. My parents are both very.
So he couldn't talk any sense into you. Is that what you're saying?
Well, you can try. So. I try to be a good listener. The reality is for a lot of the stuff we're doing, they aren't really the most partisan issues. If we need to build a hospital, who cares if it's an NDP or a Liberal or a PC? When the Liberal Party closed down Peel Memorial, I don't think that was an ideological decision based on their worldview. I think that was a bad government decision, but it wasn't necessarily. I don't think they did that because they're left-leaning politicians. I just think it was a bad decision.
So let's talk healthcare for a minute, because that's a big one in Brampton. We're underfunded provincially. We're underfunded in beds and per capita per thousand people from the rest of the province. We all know that. We have talked to MPs and MPPs about this as well. We talked about, Doug Ford talks about transfer payments to Ottawa. Yes, we know that the Ottawa transfer payments have been declining. for 20, 25 years. It used to be, I think the transfer rate used to be somewhere in the 20s, and I think it's down to around 11%. Kathleen Wynne complained about it at the same time. Nothing was done. So we know that. But at the same time, you know, Brampton is the 4th largest city in Ontario, 9th largest in Canada. And for a city this size, the amount of beds that we have is pretty, you know, it's pretty unbelievable that we only have basically one operating hospital, where Oakville, you know, all these other smaller cities do have better healthcare than us. A lot of people, including Faz, well, I guess he's out on the road, but he's even talking about, is there a third hospital being discussed?
Nope, sorry. Is that the?
That's a question for you. Yeah.
Well, look, let's get the second one done, right? I mean, that was one of the biggest things that I heard about during the campaign, knocking on doors, was our commitment to reopen Peel Memorial. And I speak from, you know, I'm not an expert in hospitals, but I was born at Peel Memorial Hospital, so you know, it's a bit of a passion project for me to try to get it done. So we're, you know, that is happening. We gotta actually, you know, let's get it open. Let's get it working. The reality is, with Brampton, the size of the city that we are, and frankly, the growth that we're about to see, we're going to need a third hospital eventually. So is a third hospital being discussed? Absolutely. Is there an announceable that I could present to your audience here on Brampton Now? Not yet, you know, but this is stuff that we're definitely fighting for. But I'd say, you know, let's get Peel Memorial open. We have TMU Medical Schools going to be opening up too. Eventually, Brampton students will become Brampton medical students, and then eventually Brampton doctors. And also long-term care. You know, we have, you know, this one of the incredible stats. The Doug Ford government between 2018 to 2022 approved more long-term care beds in Brampton alone than the previous Liberal government approved long-term care beds Ontario-wide over the 10 years preceding. And this is including, you know, one of the great innovations that we're seeing coming out of the government now is culturally sensitive long-term care. We have the NIWAS Campus of Care, which is going to be able to have seniors receiving healthcare service in their native tongue, in Punjabi, Urdu, Hindi. This is really innovative. I think it celebrates the diversity that we have in Brampton. It acknowledges the diversity that we have, certainly, and I think is a really good change. So, yeah, yes, we got to worry about a third hospital, certainly, but there's a lot more to the healthcare system than just that, and we're worrying about those things too.
Justin King, he has a question here. The discussions of increasing the bed count of Peel Memorial closer to the 800 beds, as I said, to keep pace with the growing population. I mentioned that as well in regards to the city, and you mentioned it. The city is growing. We're expecting to have, I think, another 100, 200,000 people at least over the next 5 to 10 years, which is, you know, we do have room to grow. Mississauga doesn't. I mean, they got to build up rather than out. We have an area to be able to build out. What about that? Again, my question is the underfunding on the beds and the underfunding per capita.
Well, I would say that Mississauga needs to grow too. And your viewers will know that there's a large point of contention between the provincial government and the mayor of Mississauga right now, where she doesn't want to grow. But the reality is we need to build homes. We have pretty soon there's going to be 500,000 new Canadians coming into the country every year. Most of them are going to come to Ontario, and many of them deserve to live in Mississauga if they choose. So Mississauga needs to be a little bit more welcoming of their new neighbors, I think, than they're being right now. On the about the issue of expanding beds, look, the Peel Memorial Hospital is gonna start with 250. There's going to be room for 100 more. And of course, we're always looking at ways that we can improve the healthcare system. You know, one of the things that we've been tackling right now are the ALC beds. You know, getting people that are in a hospital that shouldn't be in a hospital into a long-term care home. We've been hiring you know, healthcare workers to work the jobs as well. Over 10,000 nurses that have been hired since I think it's 2020. You know, pretty aggressive stuff. And actually a lot of that work led by Brampton's very own Pramit Sarkaria as a Treasury Board president. But
the nurses aren't very happy because Bill 124 with the 1% over 3 years is not something that they're actually looking and saying, you know, thank you for that.
Yeah, no, look, we hear it. I would also point to things like the retention bonus, which is about $5,000 going into nurses' pockets. It's much more than a 1% raise, and the also the pandemic pay, which was made permanent, which was also increased for nurses. But I know, look, we've announced our intention to appeal the court decision around Bill 124, and I'm sure. We're looking at every tool that we have to make sure that we're getting more nurses and more healthcare workers into Ontario, including looking at, sorry, Don, one second,
No,
just
okay.
including looking at foreign trained nurses. I mean, there's no reason if you can be a nurse in India or a nurse in the Philippines or a nurse in Brazil. There's no reason that you can't be a nurse in Canada. There might be some work that we've got to do to make sure that the right knowledge is there and everything else, but it should happen a lot quicker than it's happening now. And
well, I know that we basically heard the government say that 2 years ago when the pandemic first broke out, and then there was a problem with that, and the government said, yeah, we should actually make it easier, but that situation is that falls under the professional, medical association, and they're the ones that have to certify, not the government. So you
absolutely.
can say, we have to have it, but at the same time, that professional association is the one that certifies whether they meet the standards.
And the Minister of Health directed the College of Nurses to get some solutions on this, and there's some work that's being done, and we're going to make the process a lot quicker to get more foreign trained nurses working in Ontario hospitals.
So let me ask you: you've been basically, a new MP, 2 months. You've been you say they've been active in the in the community, talking about. What are you hearing? What are the main concerns for Brampton North residents that you hear about?
The biggest thing that I'm hearing right now is just a lot of anxiety around the economy. People know that we're in for a tough time. Obviously, COVID wasn't easy for anybody. Inflation is hitting hard. Affordability is the affordability crisis is growing larger and larger. We're doing a few things in government to try to make that easier, but we're also staying laser focused on growing the economy and making sure that there are job opportunities for people, but that we're also giving people the skills they need to take advantage of those job opportunities. It's funny, Don, there was some of the viewers here would probably have seen Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister, did his kind of end of year media circuit, and he was talking about being competitive with the United States, being competitive on the economic side, and he talked about, I think, the Ring of Fire. He talked about Dofasco steel in Hamilton, where we did it, where they're getting clean green steel, which is reducing emissions, but also good jobs. And he talked about the EV plant at the electric vehicle battery plant with LG and Stellantis in Windsor. And I was seeing this, and the funny thing is, every single major economic win that he had to talk about was actually happening in Ontario. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think this premier, I think Doug Ford and the PC caucus have been laser focused on setting the conditions where people want to come and invest. That's getting industrial energy under control. That's relieving $7 billion per year of business burden and red tape that was existing. And that's also just being welcoming to invite people to come work here and recognize our credentials when they do. We've removed the work requirement for 19 regulated professions, carpenters, electricians, architects, that used to have to work for 2 years to get their equivalency in Ontario that no longer have to do that. So being welcoming, being pro-growth, being pro-jobs seems to be putting us in a better state than a lot of the other provinces.
Yeah, those trade situations. I mean, I have no problem with the trade, someone working on a trade for 2 years to find their trade, because basically, if you're a tool and die maker and you only do 6 months apprenticeship, I'm not putting your die into the press to make parts because you don't know enough.
And I would just say, Don, if you can be a carpenter in another country, we'd love for you to be a carpenter in Canada. And we have a major labor shortage. And, we're a very pro-immigration party with the PC Party of Ontario. We need people to come here. We need more diversity, not less diversity. And supporting new Canadians when they come here to get good jobs and contribute to the economy is a big priority for our government. It's something that we're taking very seriously.
So up in Brampton North, do you have any pet projects that you have been working on since you've been elected?
A few of them, like the healthcare side, is a big thing. Making sure that the medical school and the hospital come the way that we want.
Yeah.
But there is, I'm sure some of the viewers will be familiar with the Heart Lake Turtle Troopers. And one of the things that they've kind of educated me on are in Loafers Lake that we have in Brampton. It's a man-made lake, pond, basically. And we actually have a very outdated shoreline. It's called a gabion basket shoreline, where the kind of rocks are jutting out. The problem is the turtles that get rescued walk out onto this shoreline, and a lot of them actually fall into it, and they're kind of very easy victims for predators. So we've been working with the Ministry of the Environment. We got the city to apply for a grant under the Species at Risk program. We're hoping for good news. So I'm working very hard to get good news. So that we can kind of modernize and upgrade that shoreline, so that the turtles that are getting rescued by hundreds of capable volunteers are given the best shot they can to live a good life. It's funny about a turtle. A mother will have about 1,100 children, but it still takes about, I think it's 50 or 60 years for a turtle to replace himself. So at the same time, we have a lot of turtles that are getting hit by cars on Heart Lake Road. We're working on that as well, trying to find solutions there. Where, literally every time that you lose a mother turtle, it's like 60 years of biodiversity progress that is kind of getting slammed. So that's a bit of I know that's probably unusual for a conservative to talk about.
No, because, well, that segues into my next question about Highway 413, and you're going to be bulldozing the Oak Ridges Moraine, and that's basically what the Sierra Club and a lot of nature groups are saying, that this is not really good for biodiversity.
Yeah, and we heard loud and clear from the residents. I'd say to people at their door when we were knocking the campaign, I said, if you don't like the Highway 413, you got plenty of political parties to choose from: the Greens, the NDP, the Liberals. None of them wanted to build the highway. The PC party wanted to, because we think Brampton deserves a bypass highway the same way anybody else does. It's funny that the most opposition we're getting on our highway are actually coming from Mississauga and from downtown Toronto. The residents, you see the traffic. Getting around Brampton is not as easy as it used to be. And there's a reason for that. We haven't had infrastructure keep up with the pace of growth. Now, regarding the Greenbelt, the Highway 413 will go through the Greenbelt the same way that the 401 goes through the Greenbelt, the same way the 404 goes through the Greenbelt, the same way any of our highways go through. That critical infrastructure is actually allowed and acceptable under the Greenbelt Act. So, it's the reality is, if we didn't have highways go through the Greenbelt, we'd have no highways leaving Toronto to get to other parts of the province. And
from my understanding, though, the federal government still they could actually, go through the EA and basically stop it. Is that correct?
So we're working with them right now. They have basically put a stake in, saying that it's due for an impact assessment, which is unusual because the federal government has never done that before on a highway. I think this is actually a very activist federal environment minister, but we're working with them. Look, reality is, even though the federal government's a Liberal one, we're a PC government. I think Brampton residents expect us to work together. And we certainly are. I've got a great relationship with my counterpart, Ruby Sahota, the Liberal MP for Brampton North. We've got to put party politics aside. We got to work together for the residents. And I think that's certainly what our transportation ministry is doing with the federal environment ministry. And we're hoping that they rethink their decision to delay the project, because we need the highway to get built. So we're very committed to getting it done. And look, I'll say we're going to get this highway built. The Premier said so. The Premier promised it during the campaign. I promised it during the campaign. The people of Brampton deserve it. So we're going to make sure it gets done.
So let me ask you a question. You're 2 months basically at Queen's Park. What have you learned other than there is an actual subway under Queen's Park?
Man, Yeah, that was I stuck my foot in it a little bit with that one. The ironic thing, like literally that day that I asked about parking, I had actually taken the subway. Like I took the GO train and then the subway into work that day. But I guess it was a good kind of lesson for me to realize I'm definitely not as smart as I think I am all the time, and maybe second guess the questions you ask sometimes. But I've learned a lot about how the place works. I'd been a staff member in the Ontario government for a while, but I didn't spend a lot of dedicated time with the legislative process, and how do committees work, and how does the debate work, and how does time, the time allocation and all the rest of it kind of work. But I've been learning that a lot. I've also been trying to make the most of my time, when I have to be downtown for the legislative session, doing my best to lobby ministers offices to deliver wins for Brampton. The conversation about the turtles under the Species at Risk Fund happened with the Environment Minister, David Piccini, at Queen's Park. Said, hey, here's a problem that we have. We need to address it. How do we do this? How do we get it done? And he said, well, Graham, I actually got a great program that you should apply to. And we're certainly hoping to get good news in the new year about it. So, it's you got to use your time. It's something, I'd spent 2 years working at Mazda Brampton as a sales consultant, and you'd see around the dealership that the really successful salespeople worked during their downtime. When you're at Queen's Park, there is downtime where you're not debating or you're not voting on something, and you could kind of get lost in the legislative chamber and look at the ceiling, or you could be on the phone working. And that's what I've been doing downtown. You see the successful MPPs are the ones that are working all the time, getting the bug in everybody's ear about the projects that we need for Brampton. We've been lobbying the health minister, certainly the transportation minister.
Well, that's what politicians are. They're basically salespeople. Good politicians are good salespeople, and they never stop. If you take a look at our mayor, Patrick Brown, right. I don't think that you can keep up with Patrick Brown on a regular basis. He's out and he works hard, and he's I don't know if he even goes to sleep on it some nights, but he's out there all the time. It's a hard thing. I mean, you're now in the front. Before you were in the background. Now your face, your MPP Brampton North. We were talking about this off camera about social media and how nasty social media can be, especially if you're a politician. Yeah. That's something that, are you getting a thicker skin, or are you just sort of, because, let's face it. I mean, everyone has dealt with trolls and this and that and the next thing, but now you're the front figure. I mean, it's intensified. So how do you deal with that?
Well, you have to, Don. You have to get a thick skin. I mean, politics is a contact sport, as we said, and I'll tell you a story. During the campaign, I had my campaign office opening on Mother's Day, and the other Brampton candidates had all the other days around that time. I didn't want it on Mother's Day. I just had to do it. It was the only day that kind of worked for us. So we had my office opening on Mother's Day. My mother came to it. I gave her flowers in front of everybody and I gave her a hug and a kiss. And we posted the video on Twitter, just wishing my mom a happy Mother's Day. And the first reply was some nameless troll saying, tell your mom that she raised a effing, another expletive. And I was like, oh,
nice. Yeah.
Like, really? Like, seriously? Seriously? Like, this is the, but you gotta have thick skin. I mean, many other people have said to my mom that she raised an excellent MPP. So we'll take those real residents' feedback more than that. But I'll talk a little bit about the mayor because I think he's been a good example for what you can achieve when you're hungry. And I'll add that the mayor's been very pro the Highway 413. Happy to see his support, certainly during the campaign, and certainly his support now. I think he's a good ally for the provincial government when it comes to things like getting hospitals built, getting the medical school opened, and building houses to deal with our housing supply crisis. He's been very positive about what we've been doing to build more homes because he agrees that Ontario needs to grow and we need to be more welcoming for newcomers by building homes for them to live in. But you also see exactly what you said, that he's a workhorse. I mean, this guy is tireless. I mean, the amount of I've also been on the other end of I guess now that I'm an MPP, I've been on the other end of the Patrick Brown lobbying effort. When he needs something for the city, I mean, this guy is tireless. He's a dog with a bone. And I certainly try to, emulate that to the best that I can. I try to be as hungry as I can to make sure that we're delivering everything we can for the residents. Because, I got elected 6 months ago. I know 3.5 years are going to fly by, and I'm going to be coming back to the residents if I run again. And they're going to say, well, what have you done with your time? We gave you 4 years. What do you have to show for it? And look, knowing Brampton residents like I do, I better have a damn good answer when that comes around 2026, and I certainly intend to. I'm not letting the opportunity go to waste.
Well, you know what? We're almost at the end of it, so thank you for coming on, Graham. It's good and refreshing to hear. I didn't want to hang back, and there's a lot of people that want to ask questions. One last question we'll put up from Justin Kane is, what are your priority for transit investment, and what can we expect to see potentially funded this term by the province?
So I think the biggest priority that we're pushing for is obviously the two-way all-day go. I think with the COVID ridership drops with Metrolinx and things, like Metrolinx is having, they're dealing with their own books, and obviously the ridership drops. I was really happy to see and have been taking advantage of the expanded service in December. I was pretty pumped that you can get on the train at downtown Brampton, and I was getting to Union in about 35 minutes, whereas it used to take me about 55 with the kind of milk run situation there. So that's a big one. Obviously the Highway 413. The reality is the majority of people, and certainly in my riding at Brampton North, drive cars, and that's not going away.
Well, they're still looking for two-way all-day go, especially on the weekends. I know, when I moved out here, my wife used to take the go in all the time, and then 9 times out of 10 on the weekends when I wanted to go in to watch a Jays game or even to go have dinner, like the go wasn't running, and it's like I had to drive. There's no other option, right? Yeah,
but even like reality is for people that are trying to get to work, or people, I got a sister in Hamilton, like I'm taking the car when I go there. You come to Heart Lake and you see or Springdale. I mean, people are driving. 99% of the homes in my riding Brampton North have a driveway, and I don't subscribe to this war on the automobile that I think some of the more left wing politicians kind of subscribe to. Ontario.
You're gonna name them?
Ontario is a climate change leader. Like we are. I want to be. We are almost single-handedly dragging the rest of the country towards our climate change goals. We're going to be hitting our Paris Accord agreement targets, and we're doing it through not through punishing drivers. We're doing it through investing in green technology. Dofasco, Hamilton, where they're going to have clean green steel through a joint federal provincial investment. That's the equivalent of 1 million cars taken off the road.
Well, you know what? I'm going to stop you there, Graham, because we're going to be out of time. But I want to bring you back because you talked about cars. We want to talk about insurance rates and postal code discrimination. There's a whole bunch of things that basically we didn't cover. And I'd love to have you back sometime in the future. I know right now you're off till February 21st.
I am not off, Don. I am working.
Okay.
Take some time with Christmas. No. Hey, you guys say this all the time. Just because I'm not going to Queen's Park doesn't mean I'm not working. I'm sitting in my office right now at 7:00. So,
but Queen's Park is
we're not working. Yeah, we're off from Queen's Park until February 19th. We are working in the riding continually. So anybody that wants to get in touch with me, graham.mcgregor@pc.ola.org. 289-298-1049. We're working all the time, so we're here fighting for residents every day.
All right, perfect. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate you coming on, and we look forward to having you in the future. Thanks very much, Graham.
I'll definitely be back. Thanks, Don. Thank
you very much.
Cheers.
All right, so there we have it. We ran a little bit over time, so we're going to finish up here. But thank you for joining us, and thank you, Graham, for coming on, talking about some issues. And we will see you on the 27th, which is next Tuesday. And I guess we'll be talking about, we'll be covering Christmas, and we'll be talking what's going on Brampton for New Year's. So thank you for joining us, and we will see you on the 27th.